In April 2024, a 24-year-old from Quakertown, Pennsylvania walked into summer without a master plan and walked out having released the most played song on the planet. Sabrina Carpenter had been releasing music for 11 years at that point. She had put out 5 studio albums. Not one of them had cracked the Billboard Hot 100 Top 20. Then one song changed everything. And it wasn't the result of a label strategy session or a radio push. It happened because she had spent a decade quietly becoming one of the most disciplined pop songwriters of her generation. You know Sabrina Carpenter. You've heard Espresso played at every coffee shop, every gym, and every sporting event for 2 consecutive summers now. You probably know she started on Disney Channel. You might know about the Grammy wins. What you don't know is the decade of quiet, relentless work that had to happen first. 4 albums that went nowhere, a Broadway run that lasted exactly 3 weeks, and a label change that looked to outsiders like a last shot. That backstory is why millions of people aren't just fans of her music. They are invested in her. And that's a different kind of loyalty than a hit single can manufacture. In 2009, a 10-year-old girl from Quakertown, Pennsylvania, entered a singing competition hosted on Miley Cyrus's website. Her name was Sabrina Carpenter. She did not win. She placed 3rd. But placing 3rd was enough. That competition caught the right person's attention, and the chain of events that followed would take her from a small town in eastern Pennsylvania to Los Angeles and eventually to stadiums across the world. Her father, David Carpenter, had played in a garage band as a young man. Her mother, Elizabeth, was a trained dancer who had also taken vocal lessons. When Sabrina was 10 years old and it became clear that singing wasn't a hobby but something she could not stop doing, David built her a recording studio inside their family home. By the time she was 10, she was posting YouTube videos of herself covering Christina Aguilera and Adele. Not for an audience, not for followers, but because she couldn't help it. In January 2013, she auditioned for a role on a new Disney Channel series. She was 13 years old. She got the part, Maya Hart, the sharp, funny best friend at the center of Girl Meets World, a spin-off of the beloved 90s series Boy Meets World. She and her mother packed up and moved to Los Angeles. Sabrina Carpenter, who had been a kid in a quiet Pennsylvania town 18 months earlier, was now shooting a network television show, navigating an entertainment industry she had barely glimpsed, and building an image before she had fully decided who she was. Girl Meets World ran from 2014 to 2017. During that time, she also signed with Hollywood Records, Disney's owned label, and released her debut studio album, Eyes Wide Open, in 2015 at just 15 years old. The album had charm. It showed real range, but it also sounded like what a Disney Channel star was expected to sound like. She followed it with Evolution in 2016, and then Singular, Act 1, and Singular Act 2 in 2018 and 2019. 4 albums, 6 years of work, and the mainstream charts remained just out of reach. By the start of 2020, Sabrina Carpenter had a dedicated fan base, years of touring experience, and 4 albums to her name. She was working harder than almost anyone in her peer group, but the industry still mostly saw her as the girl from Disney Channel, and that label was proving extremely difficult to shake. Then March 2020 arrived, and it brought with it what should have been the biggest moment of her career to that point. She was making her Broadway debut, not as a supporting player, but as the lead. She was playing Katie Heron in the Broadway musical Mean Girls. Think about what that meant. She was 20 years old carrying a Broadway show at one of the most competitive theaters in the world. It was proof in the clearest possible terms that she could command a stage. The production shut down within weeks. COVID-19 closed every Broadway show in March 2020, and Mean Girls never reopened. Her Broadway run had lasted 3 weeks. That moment could have broken her. Instead, it accelerated a decision she'd probably been building toward for years. She did not need the Disney infrastructure anymore. She needed to build something that was actually hers. In January 2021, Sabrina Carpenter left Hollywood Records. She signed with Island Records, a label under Universal Music Group, and on January 22, 2021, she released her first single under the new deal, Skin. It entered the Billboard Hot 100 at number 48. After 6 years of recording, that was her first real chart entry. It was a signal. The audience was out there. They had just needed a version of her that felt real. She followed it with Emails I Can't Send in July 2022, an album she later described as the beginning of a really freeing and artistic time for me. The album debuted at number 23 on the Billboard 200 and gave her first genuine fan anthems, Nonsense and Feather, and then came April 5, 2024. That was the day Espresso dropped. In the first week, nothing dramatic happened, but by May, something had shifted. Streams were doubling, then tripling. Then the TikToks started coming, millions of them, from every country, every demographic. By June 22, 2024, Espresso reached number 1 on the Billboard Global 200. It became the number 1 global song of summer 2024. It spent all 14 weeks of that summer in the global top 3. The only song with a perfect record across that entire stretch. It was the first song in 2024 to post 3 consecutive weeks of over 100 million global streams. Peak on the Billboard, Hot 100, number 3, MTV Video Music Awards Song of the Year, Grammy Award for Best Pop Solo Performance, 1. She had been in the music industry for a decade, and she had just released the Song of the Year. Here is what's interesting about the Sabrina Carpenter phenomenon. The obsession did not start with Espresso. It started with the decade before it. There is a core section of her fan base that has been present since Girl Meets World. They watched her grow up on screen. They bought albums that went nowhere commercially. They watched her fight for creative control in an industry that wanted to keep her in a box. And when Espresso blew up, it was not just a hit for them. It was a vindication. Millions of people who had been told, she's just a Disney girl, got to say, we told you so. That is a different kind of loyalty than most pop stars can manufacture. You cannot buy a fan base that watched you stumble for 10 years and stayed anyway. But she also captured an entirely new audience, people who discovered her through Espresso and stayed because of the wit, the precision, and the aesthetic. Her visual world is distinctly her own, retro maximalist, ABBA theatrical, with a Fleetwood Mac cool she seems to carry effortlessly. She makes the 1970s feel modern and TikTok feel cinematic. For that crowd, she's irreplaceable. You cannot get what she offers anywhere else. Her short and sweet world tour sold out arenas and stadiums across North America and Europe. And if you watched any of those performances, you saw something that is increasingly rare, a pop star who can carry 2 hours of live music without relying on spectacle. The voice is the spectacle. If you want to hear what she's doing in Man-Child or Bedchem, the way the production team intended, with the low-end warmth and vocal layering that streaming speakers flatten out, you need the right headphones. Then, in August 2025, she released Man's Best Friend, her 7th studio album, blending retro pop, soft rock, and her now signature wit. First week numbers in the United States, 366,000 equivalent album units. Traditional album sales alone, 224,000 units, a career high by a significant margin. Vinyl sales in that first week, 160,000 copies, the 9th biggest vinyl sales week since Luminate began tracking in 1991. The album was the biggest female album debut of 2025. In the UK, it was the biggest album debut by any international artist that year. She broke Spotify's record for the most streams in a day by a female artist for a debut album in 2025. The album opened at number 1 on the Billboard 200, her 2nd consecutive number 1 album. On February 1st, 2026, she performed at the Grammy Awards at Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles. 6 nominations to her name. From a 13-year-old who moved to LA with her mother and a dream, to performing on music's biggest stage with the whole industry watching, the arc is complete. Here's the debate I want you to take to the comments. Sabrina Carpenter spent 10 years grinding through Disney, 4 albums that went nowhere, a Broadway run shut down by a pandemic, a label change that looked like a last chance. And it all led to back-to-back #1 albums, 2 Grammy wins, and a 2026 Grammy performance with 6 nominations by age 26. So here's the question. Is Sabrina Carpenter a once-in-a-decade pop talent who simply needed time to arrive? An artist the industry couldn't yet contain, who eventually outgrew every box they built for her? Or is she proof that the music industry is systematically broken, that labels routinely sign teenage girls, package them into a safe image during the exact years when authentic artistic identity forms, and waste the best years of their development? Because if the industry had given her real creative freedom at 20 instead of 22, how much further ahead would we be right now? Let me know which side you're on in the comments. If you made it this far, subscribe. We drop stories like this every week. Follow at Stardom on Instagram and TikTok. See you in the next one.